Hello there. In this video, I'm going to talk about the Finch West LRT, the most recent addition to Toronto's transit network as of the making of this video. The Finch West LRT's history can be really traced back to the late 1960s. So, let's get into the video. The origins of the Finch West LRT date back to the first proposals for some kind of crosstown route across the northern end of the city. There has been a desire to construct a route along the north end of the city since at least the late 1960s. The first of these plans can be found in the late 1960s when then-Mayor of North York, James Service, proposed a massive extension of the Bloor-Danforth subway to pass through the north end of the city, turning it into a loop line. Specifically, his proposal called for the line to be extended north along the Stouffville Line corridor to the Finch Hydro corridor, and then run west to the Humber-Pearson Hydro corridor, and then south along the Kipling Hydro corridor to Kipling Station. The Yonge subway would also be extended north to Finch Avenue to facilitate a transfer at Yonge and Finch. This proposal would ultimately be ignored by Metro Council. The next proposal would come along in the 1970s in the form of the Etobicoke RT project. By the 70s, the cost of subway construction was becoming an issue for Metro Toronto, and so they began to look for ways to provide rapid transit for a lower cost. It must be understood that at this time there was no set funding model for construction of transit lines like there is today. While the province and federal government could contribute to these projects, they had no obligation to, nor any requirement to contribute a specific amount of money. That is to say, at this time, Metro Toronto and the TTC were largely footing the bill for transit expansion projects. Just for perspective, the one-stop extension of the Bloor-Danforth from Warden to Kennedy cost nearly as much to build as the 9-stop extension of the Bloor-Danforth to Warden and Islington. It is no surprise then that after the extensions to Kennedy and Kipling, Metro would declare them the last subway extensions and begin searching for cheaper methods of providing transit. The Etobicoke RT was one such project, with the route being an LRT line, or as they called it at the time, a high-speed streetcar, utilizing linked-together ALRV cars. The route would have run from Kipling Station to York University with a branch to the airport, utilizing the Kipling, Humber-Pearson, and Finch Hydro corridors. This project would ultimately fall through though after the Scarborough RT's conversion to the new ICTS trains proved less than optimal. At the same time Metro and the TTC were examining the Etobicoke RT, the province was also exploring its own project for the north end of the city. That being the northern line for the proposed GO ALRT project. In short, this was an automated line running from Pickering to Oakville via the Finch Hydro corridor like the REM in Montreal. It was noted in a report from 1985 that on a hypothetical route running between Pickering and Oakville through North York, ridership in the west end towards Yonge Street would peak around 14,300 passengers per hour per direction for a route running along Sheppard Avenue, and 13,900 passengers per hour per direction if it ran along Finch. This, however, assumes an ALRT-style interregional line and not a shorter line that stays within Toronto. This plan would ultimately fall through though with the retirement of Premier Bill Davis in 1985. I have a video that goes into significantly more detail on the ALRT project, and you can find it linked in the corner. By the 1980s, both Metro Toronto and the TTC were aware that something would need to be done in the north end of the city, as in a report from 1985 it would be stated, "Without some form of rapid transit, travel conditions by road or transit can only be expected to deteriorate on the Sheppard-Finch corridor." The report would note that at this time, local bus routes operated at an average speed of 18 to 24 kilometers per hour during peak periods. Express buses could reach up to 28 kilometers per hour. East of Yonge Street, routes were moving around 3,000 passengers per hour per direction, which is the upper limit of what a bus route can handle. Things west of Yonge Street had not reached this point yet and would be a contributing factor as to why the TTC's and Metro's focus moved exclusively to a subway east of Yonge. By comparison, a rapid transit line using conventional technology, a subway, could reach an average speed of 40 km per hour with a 2 km stop spacing. The obvious trade-off here is the need for a parallel bus service to fill the gaps. Metro Toronto and the TTC would continue their own work on some kind of crosstown route in the north end of the city. When the Yonge subway reached Finch Avenue in the 1970s, the area we today call North York Centre would begin to develop. By 1985, approximately 13,500 jobs were located in the area, and North York had a target of 48,000 jobs in the area by 2011. Ultimately, as the North York City Centre continued to grow, there would be a greater need to transport commuters into and out of the area. They would eventually focus in on a route between North York and the Scarborough Town Centre, as at this time the transit in the northeastern end of the city was a higher concern. Ultimately, it would be decided that a subway along Sheppard Avenue between the proposed Downsview station and the Scarborough Town Centre was the project to pursue. As such, this would be included in the TTC's and Metro Toronto's Network 2011 plan. There was a long-term idea for a western extension of the Sheppard line, with the proposal seeing the route run west and then north to the Finch Hydro Corridor. From there, it would run west through the Humber-Pearson Hydro Corridor and south through the Kipling Hydro Corridor to Kipling Station. This idea was just that though, an idea and not really a serious proposal. Rapid transit service in the northwestern end of the city would take a back seat to the plan in the northeast, and there would be no further discussion on a rapid transit line in northwest North York and northern Etobicoke until the mid-2000s. In 2007, then Mayor of Toronto David Miller would announce the Transit City plan. This plan would see 7 new LRT lines constructed around Toronto, including a 17-kilometer line running along Finch Avenue West from Yonge Street to Humber College at Highway 27. It must be noted though that the LRT at this point is not like what we see today. Instead of using larger Alstom LRVs, the original idea for Transit City was for it to be built to the city's streetcar standards and thus use Flexity Outlook streetcars. The line would be connected to the rest of the streetcar network at St. Clair Avenue via the Jane LRT. The change to the current LRT standards would come later in development. Finch West was chosen as a candidate for construction as at the time the 36 Finch West bus had a daily ridership of 42,600 riders per day, or 2,130 passengers per hour per direction. This number was expected to grow to about 2,300 to 2,800 passengers per hour per direction by 2031. This ridership forecast was far too low to justify a subway, which requires a minimum of 10,000 passengers per hour per direction, or a light metro, which needs at least 8,000 passengers per hour per direction. However, it does fall within the scope of a BRT, which maxes out around 5,000 passengers per hour per direction, and an LRT, which according to the TTC can carry between 2,000 and 12,000 passengers per hour per direction. BRT, however, would be dropped from the project as according to the project assessment, a BRT along Finch West would require at least 37 articulated buses per hour, operating at 100-second intervals, or 1 bus every minute and 40 seconds. That, for perspective, is even more frequent than both the Line 1 and 2 subways. By comparison, the vehicles used on an LRT are naturally larger and more easily scalable to meet ridership demand. The assessment notes that a single LRV can carry upwards of 130 passengers and can be coupled together to increase capacity. In fact, it is stated that in order to meet demand, LRVs would need to operate every 2 minutes and 45 seconds if not coupled together. This would be challenging to do while also avoiding bunching. By coupling, frequency on the line can be operated at a more reasonable 5 minutes and 30 seconds. It was also noted that the per kilometer construction cost of the LRT line was around $40 million. This is compared to the $220 million per kilometer for a subway line at the time. Stops on the line would be spaced every 400 to 600 meters in order to strike a balance between good local access and maintaining a high speed. The average stop spacing would be around 646 meters, which is lower than Line 2's 875 meters, but higher than the 36 Finch West bus's 295 meters. The individual surface platforms would either be 3-meter wide platforms if side-facing, and 4 meters if central. Platforms would be 63 meters long to accommodate a coupled LRV. The maximum allowable gradient on the route would be no more than 5%. The line itself would run down the middle of Finch Avenue West on a 7.38 meter wide right-of-way between Yonge Street and Woodbine Downs Boulevard. The route would start at a turnback loop at the intersection of Yonge and Hendon Avenue. It would then run south to Finch Avenue and then west to a turnback loop at Woodbine Downs Boulevard. Yes, you heard that right, turnback loops. Once again, remember that the earliest form of Transit City was for the lines to be the same as the streetcars, and that also means using single-ended cars. The change to the double-ended LRVs would come later in the project. Stops would be located at Talbot Road, Senlac Road, Bathurst Street, Torresdale Avenue, Wilmington Avenue, Dufferin Street, Cheswood Road, Keele Street, Sentinel Road, Tobermory Drive, Jane Street, Norfinch Drive, Signet Drive, Weston Road, Milvin Drive, Pearldale Avenue, Islington Avenue, Kipling Avenue, Silverstone Drive, Albion Road, Martin Grove Road, and Highway 27. Finally, the opening date for the line had originally been planned for 2015. However, the global recession in 2008 would see that date pushed back to 2018. The project had an estimated cost of $835 million, although these numbers are always optimistic, especially considering this version of the route is 7 kilometers longer than the one that would eventually be built. By 2008, the project had begun to change into the Finch West line we know today. The route would no longer be part of the streetcar network, as Transit City as a whole had been reconfigured into a modern LRT network using larger LRVs operating on a standard gauge track. As a result, the turnback loops would be eliminated, as LRVs would simply turn back via a crossover at the terminal stations. There would also be some changes to the alignment of the route. The route would no longer run to Woodbine Downs Boulevard, but would instead turn south at Highway 27 and run to a stop at Humber College. The stops on the line were also changed, with stops now at Edithville Drive, Finchhurst Drive, Bathurst Street, Torresdale Avenue, Wilmington Avenue, Dufferin Street, Alness Street, Cheswood Drive, Alexton Road, Keele Street, Sentinel Road, Driftwood Avenue, Jane Street, Norfinch Drive, Signet Drive, Weston Road, Milvin Drive, Duncan Woods Drive, Islington Avenue, Kipling Avenue, Albion Road, Martin Grove Road, Westmore Drive, and Humber College Boulevard. For the eastern terminus at Yonge and Finch, the TTC would examine 4 possible alignments, as this is where the route would interchange with the eastern half of Line 1. Option 1 would be a surface level stop on the west side of Yonge Street on Finch. A direct underground pathway would link the LRT platform to Finch Station's mezzanine. Option 2 would also be a surface level stop, however this one would be on Yonge Street north of Finch. Option 3 would see the line perform an on-street loop by running north on a private right-of-way between Greenview Avenue and Duplex, which was empty land at the time, and then turn east on Hendon Avenue and then turn south into the Finch bus terminal, with the east side being converted into an LRT platform. Finally, option 4 would be an underground platform located at the same level as the station's mezzanine. The tunnel portal and ramp would be located immediately east of Eldora Avenue. For the stop at Keele Street, the TTC would examine two options, as this is where an interchange with the Vaughan extension of Line 1 would be. Option 1 would be a surface level stop on the east side of Keele Street. An underground path would be constructed to connect the LRT platform to Finch West Station. Option 2 would be an underground platform located directly below the street, with the portals immediately east and west of the station. Finally, as for the western terminus at Humber College, the TTC would examine multiple alignments to access the college, 3 to be exact. The first would see the line continue along Finch and then turn south onto Humber College Boulevard and terminate at a stop at Highway 27. An additional station would be constructed immediately out front of the college. This option was rejected as it would add an additional 1,600 meters to the line. Option 2 examined running the line south through the nearby Hydro Corridor to Humber College Boulevard and then running west to a stop either on Arboretum Boulevard or a stop in the parking lot just west of it. While this option did mean the line could directly serve Etobicoke General Hospital, it was noted that there was not enough space within the Hydro Corridor to accommodate the LRT without expensive expropriations, so this alignment was dropped. The third and final option examined would be to run the line south on Highway 27 and then west on Humber College Boulevard to one of the two aforementioned stations. An additional stop would be constructed at Humber College Boulevard. Ultimately, option 3 would be the preferred option at the time, with the preferred station location being parallel to Arboretum Boulevard. This alignment would also allow for a possible southern extension of the route to either the planned development at Woodbine Racetrack or Pearson Airport. The TTC would also leave open the possibility of an eastern extension of the route from Yonge Street east to Don Mills Avenue and then south to Don Mills Station. By 2009, the provincial transit agency Metrolinx had joined the project. As well, the underground alignments at Finch and Finch West stations had solidified as the preferred alignments. Finally, it had been decided that a yard for the line would be constructed on an empty plot of land between Yorkgate Boulevard and North Finch Drive. This yard would store trains for the Finch West LRT as well as some trains for the Jane LRT. On April 1, 2009, then Mayor David Miller and Ontario Premier Dalton McGuinty would announce $7.8 billion in provincial funding to construct both the Finch West LRT and the Eglinton Crosstown LRT. Things were looking bright for the project, but this wouldn't last long. Only a year after funding was announced, the province would cut back on the project in an effort to save money. The Finch West line would instead be built in 2 phases, with phase 1 being a 10.3 kilometer line running from Finch West Station to Humber College. The remaining 7 kilometers to Yonge Street would be deferred to a future date as phase 2. While a cost-cutting measure on the surface, there was also the complication that east of Bathurst Street, Finch Avenue narrows to 30 meters in width, with seemingly no space to expand the road to the necessary 36 meters to accommodate the right-of-way without expropriations. On December 1st of 2010, then Mayor Rob Ford would unilaterally cancel the Transit City plan as he believed the routes along Eglinton, Finch, and Sheppard should be subways. This was all part of his perceived war on cars. Of course, the provincial government could have vetoed this decision as they had committed funding to it, but they chose not to. There would be a brief proposal for constructing a subway along Finch West. However, this only had support from Mayor Rob Ford and area councillor Giorgio Mammoliti. This idea, however, was horrendous and everyone knew it, so it disappeared as quickly as it appeared. In the meantime, Toronto City Council would battle over Sheppard Avenue and the Scarborough RT, and so the Finch West line faded into the background. After 2 years of back and forth, the City of Toronto would enter into an agreement with Metrolinx to restart construction of the Finch West and Eglinton Crosstown lines. Metrolinx projected that construction on the route could begin in 2015 with the line opening by 2018. This opening date would be pushed back to 2020, and by April 2015, construction on the line still had yet to begin. That month, Metrolinx would announce that construction would begin in 2016 with a planned opening in 2021. Another issue that would rear its head at this time would be Bombardier's disastrous rollout of the Flexity Outlook streetcars to Toronto. This is important as the Finch West and Eglinton Crosstown lines were both planned to use the Flexity Freedom trains built by Bombardier. However, now there were concerns that they may not be able to build all of these new trains on time. As a result, in 2017, Metrolinx would enter into an agreement with Alstom to construct 17 Citadis Spirit LRVs for the Finch West LRT. Due to this, Metrolinx would push back the opening for the line to 2022. And just so you know, construction still hadn't started yet. At some point during all of this, there had been a slight revision to the route's alignment at Humber College. Now the stop would be built parallel to Highway 27 and be constructed in a trench instead of at grade. This change would allow for an easier extension south to Woodbine and the airport. As well, it would eliminate the need for a stop at Humber College Boulevard, since this one stop could adequately serve both Humber College and Etobicoke General Hospital. In 2018, Metrolinx would choose the consortium Mosaic Transit Group to construct the line, with the group specifically charged with constructing and maintaining the line and stations for 30 years. Metrolinx would own the line while the TTC would operate it. Construction on the Finch West LRT would finally commence in 2019, a full 4 years after Metrolinx had originally said. The cost to build the line had now grown to $2.5 billion, which is arguably a more reasonable assumption compared to the 2007 estimate. That said, once construction began, it proceeded relatively quietly. Perhaps it was because it was a simple route with a simple construction. Or perhaps it was because the Eglinton Crosstown was growing into such a debacle that everyone forgot we were also building an LRT along Finch. Around this time, Metrolinx would also change the names of some of the stops as part of their effort to give stations distinct names and avoid duplications and using cardinal directions. As part of this effort, the stop at Weston Road would be renamed to Emery, Islington Avenue would become Rowtree Mills, and Kipling Avenue would become Mount Olive. As well, the stop at Silverstone Drive would be added back to the line after having been removed in 2008. It would now be called Stevenson Road. Construction of the Finch West line wouldn't be without issue though, as the pandemic would delay construction of the line and eliminate any possibility of the line opening in 2022. All that said though, in the grand scheme, construction of the route went by pretty quickly and as flawlessly as you can expect for a transit construction project in North America. Testing of the first trains for the line would commence in May of 2024 and construction finished in September of 2024. The route, however, would not open for another year as Metrolinx and the TTC continued their testing of the line. As well, Mosaic Transit Group had filed a lawsuit against the TTC in August of 2024, so that no doubt held up proceedings with the line. This lawsuit was filed as Mosaic felt that Metrolinx and the TTC were holding up completion of the line. By March of 2025, the construction cost of the line had increased from $2.5 billion to $3.585 billion. There would be signs of life for the opening date, as on September 20th, 2025, the route began its 30-day revenue service demonstration, which it completed seemingly without a hitch in October. The line was officially handed over to the TTC on November 3rd, and on the 24th, the TTC would officially announce the opening day for the line on December 7th. And here we are. Toronto has opened its first new rapid transit line in over 20 years as of the making of this video. From James Service's loop line proposal in the 60s to David Miller's Finch West LRT, there is 60 years of history here. The northwestern end of Toronto has finally received a higher order transit line. This is an area that for its entire history had been a transit desert that both the city and province tried to serve, but for one reason or another just couldn't. Even before the line opened, there was already movement on a potential southern extension of the route to either Woodbine Racetrack or Pearson Airport. At a meeting on February 20th, 2020, the Metrolinx board presented a 7.7 kilometer extension of the route to the airport. This extension would see the line continue south along Highway 27 and then run west on Disco Road, south on Carlingview, west on Dixon Road, north on Bresler Drive, and then west on Campus Road and Viscount Road to the proposed airport transit terminal, where riders could transfer to the Airport Link train and the Eglinton Crosstown. While no stations have yet been proposed, I could see there being stops at Queens Plate Boulevard, Rexdale Boulevard, Woodbine GO Station, Carlingview Drive, Worcester Road, Dixon Road, Bresler Drive, and Pearson Airport. It is believed that this extension would have an estimated ridership of around 2,500 passengers per hour per direction. Of course, this proposal is still a work in progress and is years away from being finalized. There are of course those who for one reason or another decry having an LRT on Finch. However, I am sure that for the residents in the area or the students commuting to Humber College, the LRT will be an upgrade to just sitting on a bus. Could I nitpick things about this line? Sure I could. For example, the use of, let's call it, diet signal priority is not ideal and is just another example of Toronto Transportation Services' car-first mentality getting in the way of genuine progress. I could nitpick the line's aesthetic, as it would look much nicer with a grass track bed like on Eglinton instead of bare concrete. I could nitpick the fact that there may be a couple too many stops on this line and some of them could be cut and relocated. I could nitpick the fact that the rolling stock on the Finch West and Eglinton Crosstown are incompatible and thus moving trains from one line to another isn't possible. I could nitpick that the line doesn't go to Yonge Street and there is currently no discussion on this extension at the moment. These nitpicks, however, are things that can be fixed in the future and ultimately they achieve nothing. The Finch West LRT is what it is and is what it will be for a very long time. We have known since 2007 that the Finch West corridor is never going to be a heavy hitter in regards to ridership. Even if the route reaches 2,800 passengers per hour per direction, that is still well within the capacity of an LRT and so far below the minimum capacity of even a light metro that if you genuinely believe Finch West would be better served by one, then you may as well take like $4 or $5 billion, put it in a pile and light it on fire, because that's essentially what you're going to do. Transit works best when it is tailor-made for the situation, and there are indeed places in Toronto where a subway or a light metro is a better use of money. Finch West is not one of them. Throwing more buses at the problem also is not a reasonable course of action, because we know that it would take an unreasonable number of buses operating at an unreasonable frequency to match the capacity of the LRT. For the Finch West corridor, LRT appears to be the right fit for the job, and the residents of the area will no doubt benefit from it. And with that, I will end this video here. Thank you for watching this video, and if you enjoyed it and want to see more like it, please hit that subscribe button because there are more videos like it on the channel, and there are more videos like it on the way. If there's anything you want to say about the Finch West LRT, don't be afraid to do so in the comments section down below. And with that, I'll see you in the next video.